In the heart of World War II, amidst Norway's frigid mountains and harsh winter, thousands of Soviet soldiers found themselves in brutal captivity. Their journey was one of suffering, resilience, and survival, but their story remains less known than others. Today we explore the harrowing experiences of these Soviet prisoners of war in Norway and how the memory of their suffering lingers in the present day. In 1941, Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, a massive invasion of the Soviet Union. As part of this campaign, thousands of Soviet soldiers were captured and transported to various locations across Nazi-occupied Europe, including Norway. From 1941 to 1945, an estimated 100,000 Soviet prisoners of war, POWs, were brought to Norway, where they were subjected to harsh conditions. Norway, under German occupation, became a remote yet critical site for the Nazi war effort, and Soviet POWs were forced to contribute to it. Prisoners were primarily used in forced labor, building infrastructure crucial for Nazi operations in Norway. From roads to railways, their labor shaped the rugged terrain of Norway's northern regions. But this was not an ordinary workforce. It was a workforce that lived and died under extreme conditions. Life in these camps was marked by extreme hardship. The Soviet prisoners faced severe weather conditions, often working in sub-zero temperatures with little more than rags to protect them from the cold. Food was scarce, leading to widespread malnutrition and starvation. The camps themselves were overcrowded and unsanitary, breeding disease and despair. Many prisoners were forced to work on vital Nazi infrastructure projects, including the Nordland Railway and Arctic Road. These projects, essential to the German war machine, were built at the cost of thousands of lives. It's estimated that 13,000 to 14,000 Soviet POWs died in Norway due to starvation, disease, and brutal working conditions. For many, Norway was a place of no return. Despite the Nazi presence, not all Norwegians turned a blind eye to the suffering of the Soviet prisoners. Many locals, at great personal risk, attempted to provide assistance to the prisoners. Some would secretly leave food or warm clothing for the POWs, knowing full well that if they were caught, they could face severe punishment or even death. These small acts of kindness were lifelines for many prisoners and a testament to the shared humanity that can endure even in the darkest of times. When the war ended in 1945, the Soviet POWs were liberated. However, their ordeal was far from over. Those who survived were often physically and mentally scarred by their experiences. Repatriation was not always immediate, and for some, returning to the Soviet Union meant facing suspicion or even punishment by Stalin's regime, which viewed captured soldiers as traitors. For others, the journey home was one of delayed reunions with families they hadn't seen in years. Many Soviet POWs, especially those who were too weak to travel, remained in Norway for months after the war. During this time, they received medical care and were slowly reintegrated into society. For some, Norway became a new home as they chose to stay and rebuild their lives in the land where they had once been prisoners. Today, the legacy of the Soviet POWs in Norway is an integral part of the country's history. Various memorials have been erected to commemorate the prisoners who lost their lives during the war. These memorials, often located near the sites of former camps, serve as a reminder of the suffering endured by these men and the brutal realities of war. The Chutta Russian War Cemetery is one of the most prominent memorial sites, where over 8,000 Soviet soldiers are buried. Annual ceremonies are held to honor their memory, with both Russians and Norwegians participating. It stands as a solemn reminder of the price of war and the shared history between the two nations. In recent years, there has been a renewed interest in documenting and studying the experiences of Soviet POWs in Norway. Historians, both in Norway and abroad, have worked to uncover forgotten stories, study wartime records, and ensure that the voices of these prisoners are not lost to time. This work has also involved the preservation of the site where POW camps once stood, turning them into places of historical significance. Understanding the full scope of the Soviet POWs' experiences in Norway has been a painstaking process, but it has shed new light on the broader impact of the war on Northern Europe. The ongoing research helps ensure that future generations can learn from the past, honoring the sacrifices made and the resilience shown by those who endured captivity. While many of the physical remnants of these camps have disappeared, the scars of that period remain. The landscapes that once bore witness to suffering now stand as peaceful, serene places. But the memory of what happened there has not faded. Through memorials, education, and ongoing research, Norway ensures that the stories of the Soviet POWs continue to be told. The story of the Soviet prisoners of war in Norway is one of endurance, suffering, and ultimately, remembrance. As we look back on this painful chapter, we are reminded of the cost of war and the importance of reconciliation. The memory of these prisoners lives on, not just in the history books, but in the hearts of the people who remember their sacrifice.